Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Tombs, Feral Darkness, out October 17th on Redefining Darkness. The album has 10 tracks, 50 minutes in length, and this is the band's 6th full-length studio album. They are an American post-black metal band. When it comes to the design of this record, I think the album has two different ways to be looked at. If you're a fan of the band and you're listening to this album, I think you're going to see that the record is actually very dynamic. It's an album that offers a lot of nuances, but a lot of defined elements that differentiate songs and give them unique characteristics that allow the record to have a lot more fluidity and therefore to be more dynamic. If you're not a fan of the band and you're coming into this record and discovering the band perhaps through this album, the first two things you're going to notice is that the album is very dark and has a sense of density to it. That hides the dynamic mechanisms and that hides the nuances and individuality of the tracks and becomes kind of the common denominator from beginning to end. So depending on which camp you are, the overall album experience is going to be quite different. And I think that is an interesting approach and an interesting aspect about this record. Now, if you're not a fan of the band and that's the experience that you have, I believe that the more you listen to the album, the more you're going to discover from it, the more you're going to appreciate it, and the more layers you're going to be able to peel and see exactly how dynamic the record actually is. So it's an album that doesn't offer everything to the listener at first glance. It's definitely an album that makes you work for it. As far as the sound is concerned, there is definitely that sense of density, and it's definitely a dark sounding album. That is undeniable, regardless of which camp you fall on. I think this is something we can agree on, that this album has that sort of dark grit, that dark atmosphere that really embraces every single song on this record. The overall production on this album allows the sound to have this incredible volume, this incredible size, and really pushes it into the forefront. For an album that has so much grit, for an album that is so rugged around the edges, the record sounds massive, and it's really hard to create an album with this kind of soundscape that sounds this large and at the same time still have the kind of grit that you normally get from albums that have a much smaller footprint. The ability to combine both really makes this album stand out sonically. It has its unique DNA, has its own unique fingerprint, and the ability to do that really separates this album from the others around it. It gives it that uniqueness, it gives that unique fingerprint to the record. Now, one of the elements that I enjoyed the most on this album is definitely the guitar sound, because a lot of that volume, a lot of that size, and definitely the grit comes from the guitar sound, and the guitar sound is very consistent for the most part throughout the entire album, creating that dark ambiance, helping with the size, creating volume, adding to the overall density. But the guitar sound also adds a lot of melody, and a lot of melodies that create that overall darkness that then permeates through the more robust sounding experience of the tracks. Really intelligent as far as creating that melody, those melodic underlines in tracks, in order for them to also have more ebbs and flows, in order for them to be a little bit easier to digest, easier to approach, and not allowing the record to feel like a continuous line all the way through. This aspect of the guitar sound really breaks apart from that overall heaviness, from that overall chugginess, from that overall distortion that they bring forward. But it's an important element because it allows the same piece of the puzzle to have different shapes depending on where you place it. The drums on this record also play an important role. They play an important role in terms of giving substance to the volume, in terms of helping the overall size, and a lot of the heaviness and a lot of the power on this album really comes out of the drum sound. The drum sound on this record is really excellent. I found that the mixture was really good, the production behind it was really good, but perhaps more importantly, the execution of the drum sound really helped the guitars have their own space to breathe. And while both elements add to that overall density of sound, it's still really easy to see what one is doing versus the other. Then once you get into the vocals come a little bit deeper in the mix. They're not buried in the mix, but they're definitely a little bit deeper. There are some nuances in the vocal performance here and there. A song with a little bit more of an electronic aspect attached to the vocals, some a little bit deeper, then coming a little bit more into the middle, never into the forefront. There are some nuances vocally on this record, but they're so minimal that the overall experience is one that feels consistent, that offers an idea of consistency. But they also add not just to the heavier side of the sound, they also add to that darkness that really lingers throughout the entire album. This is a super strong record by Tombs. I feel like this is a very complete sounding album by Tombs, and it's definitely an album that makes me look at it from a different perspective, or from different perspectives the more that I listen to it. But to me, the greatest attribute of this record is the size. The album is not designed to be played in a small venue. It has the sound of a big venue. And I think that's an important aspect. For you to create a record that resonates in that kind of environment, adds quality to the experience, adds quality to the record, and they were able to do that without losing any of the band's DNA in the process. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Glass Eyes Ghoul. This is the opening track. The reason I picked it is because it's a song that really sets the tone for everything this record offers. It sets the tone on the darkness, it sets the tone on the sound, it sets the tone on the mix, it sets the tone on the experience of the vocals, how the dynamics that the vocals have, how they interact with the sound, where they are in the mix. All of these elements come together in this track, and this track really sets the bar for what the record is going to be going forward. It's a heavy song, there is some density to it, it's methodic in how it moves. The fact that it's methodic and has big size, big volume, gives it even more density, and it adds that grit at the tail end of the sound, specifically when it comes from the guitars. I think that's really important as well, because that's an element that's going to stay very consistent. The drums with the size, with the power, with the heaviness. It's a very complete track. It's a track that has that dirt on the edges, but it has so much size, it has so much volume. Then you have Black Shapes. This track is absolutely demolishing. It just feels like a freight train. It's brutality and chaos incarnated. That's how it feels. It's like a snowball effect. The track never stops. It never feels like it stops. It feels like it's just getting bigger and bigger. The drums are insane on this track. Really insane drum sound on this song, which adds to that sense of moving forward and moving towards the listener and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The drums definitely help with that experience. There is some guitar melodies mixed in that allow the track at times to become more digestible, so that you don't feel like the track is constantly in your face. There are some breaks, there are some reprieves, and they really come through that more melodic guitar sound. The vocals add a doom, dark experience to the track, and that's a nice balance, because it almost feels like it adds a different layer to everything that is happening, because everything is happening so quickly. It's important to add elements that slow things down, so you feel, or it gives you the impression that the song has a lot more ebbs and flows, and it's not just pedal to the metal and super linear beginning to end. It's a track that also brings some grindcore elements into the forefront, and it definitely has a lot of inspiration in that genre, in terms of how it's presented, in terms of how it's feeling, and even in how the vocals interact with the sound behind them. Last but definitely not least, Wasps. Super driven, another super driven track. Not as chaotic, not as brutal as Black Shapes for sure. The vocals hit very differently on this track. I think if there is one thing that sets this song apart, is the vocals, the mix, the delivery, the tonality. I think that is an important aspect to really separate this track from a song like Black Shapes. It's a track that just runs over the listener, but in a different perspective. The vocals really help soften the experience. Instead of having guitar melodies to do that, on this track you have the vocals helping a lot more with that soften of the blow, and still allowing the track to be super dynamic and accessible at the exact same time. This is it, Tombs with Feral Darkness, once again out October 17th on Redefining Darkness. Let me know your thoughts on the band. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.